Guys, just wanted to talk about my strategy behind a true NFL rebuild, how I would approach it, what I would do. We've got several teams in the position right now. The Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks kind of at a crossroads, and then the Detroit Lions. I've done videos on both the Texans and the Seattle Seahawks on my philosophy behind it. I think for Houston, it's very obvious. You have the assets now. You've got 2 first-round picks in the next 3 drafts. You should build around your quarterback and then get the quarterback in 2023. You've got 2 great young options. Seattle, it's a little bit more complicated, but when it comes to an actual rebuild, my philosophy is a total 1-year teardown. And the strategy and the idea of it is you would rather be really bad for 1 year, get the number 1 overall pick, get your franchise quarterback, and get out and get building, rather than be in this weird situation where you're 7-9, you're 5-11, you're 4-12. And I've actually got a visual representation of what I'm talking about. How do you avoid a situation like that? It is totally tearing down and losing a bunch of games in one specific year. So let's take a look at this. We've got Team A and Team B. You can take a look at year 1, both teams. I know there's 17 games in the regular season now, but I just wanted it to be, visual. We're so used to 16 games, so I put it at 16 games. Both teams have their franchise quarterback. Year 1, they're 12-4, right? Year 2, they're 10-6. They lose their franchise quarterback. What I would suggest doing, if you have a legitimate option in the draft, is a total teardown. Total teardown. Don't try and win games. 4-12, 5-11, getting the 7th or 8th pick does nothing. Guys, I'm a Browns fan. I went through years of being 4-12. 5-11. The only reason the Cleveland Browns were able to get out of that gutter, that last place, but not bad enough to get the number 1 overall pick, is because they went 0-16. They went 1-15. And you think, oh, that's terrible. They're a poverty franchise. No, they got Myles Garrett. They got Baker Mayfield. And what people don't understand is having the number 1 overall pick also allows you the first pick of the 2nd round. They were able to also get Nick Chubb with I believe, like the 35th overall pick. So I would recommend it's a 1-year teardown to where you're really bad. You get the number 1 overall pick instead of floundering at 4-12, at 5-11, at 5-11. This B team is building. You're 1-15. You get I don't know what that is. You're 1-15. You get your franchise quarterback. You're 4-12 with your rookie quarterback. Now you're 9-7. He's improving, and then you're 12-4 instead of this flounder where you're never truly horrible. There needs to be a teardown, and I know there's a lot of negative energy around tanking, but it is a legitimate strategy. You look at the B option, guys. Think about the Cincinnati Bengals. They were really bad for 1 year. They got Joe Burrow. They started building. They got a little bit better. They got the 6th overall pick the next year. They got Jamar Chase. The year after that, they're in the Super Bowl. And it's funny how people say, oh, you shouldn't tank. Tell that to the Cincinnati Bengals, who had the number 1 overall pick. 2 years later, they're in the Super Bowl. The idea is to tear down. Take a look at the Houston Texans right now. I would trade Brandon Cooks for a 2nd or 3rd round pick, whatever you can get for him. Trade Brandon Cooks. Trade Laramie Tunsil, but eat some of his contract so it makes him more kind of attractive in a trade. You can get more back for him. Maybe you can get a 2nd round pick back for him if you eat some of his salary, because he does have a $17 million salary. And completely rebuild. I did this yesterday with the Houston Texans, to where you're building your entire offense before you get your young franchise quarterback, because we want to avoid the situation that Zach Wilson is in right now. We want to avoid the situation that Justin Fields is in right now. These guys have very few receiver options. They've got a bad offensive line. The situation that Trevor Lawrence was in last year, and now Jacksonville's playing catch up. They're throwing money at everyone. They're overpaying Christian Kirk. We'll see what ends up happening in the draft. I would highly suggest they draft Akeem Aquanu. I think they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson, though. But it's like, we don't want to play catch-up. So if I was Houston, what I would do is I would draft my entire offense around the quarterback, tank, be really bad. You got a bunch of rookies. and then get the number 1 overall pick or number 2 overall pick or whatever and use that pick on your franchise quarterback. So your franchise quarterback comes into a situation where maybe you have Trevor Penning at left tackle and you can sign a good veteran right tackle because you're going to have the money. Most of your team is on rookie contracts. You can sign a good veteran right tackle. You've got maybe a George Pickens at one of the wide receiver positions, Garrett Wilson at the other one. If I was Houston, I would strongly recommend trading down from number 3 overall. Number 3 overall does you very little good. Trade back to number 8 or number 9. Get a second or third round asset so you can build the team more. You can get another good receiver. This receiving class is so deep. It's the idea to where you only have to sacrifice. You only have to be really bad for 1 year. Kind of like Cincinnati did it where they were really bad and then they got Joe Burrow. It's this idea where you tear down, you cut, you rip the Band-Aid off. You go 1-15, it's bad. But guys, the only reason the Cleveland Browns, my team, we were able to turn it around, we went 0-16, and you think, oh, that's horrible. No, 0-16 was better than 4-12. Trust me. We went 4-12 for 10 straight years. Going 0-16, getting Myles Garrett is better than going 4-12 and getting a mediocre pass rusher. It just is. I'm sorry. That number 1 pick is way more valuable than the number 6 pick. We've had the number 6 pick before. We've gotten Barkevious Mingo. We've had the number 8 pick before. We got Justin Gilbert. Getting the number 1 overall pick and even Baker Mayfield, who was really our best quarterback since I don't know who. You could say Baker Mayfield didn't live up to it. Still, he was a pretty good quarterback compared to what we had. And we could have drafted Josh Allen or someone else, or Sam Darnold would have been worse. But it's just like you want to strip down. And I'm not saying to do it for 2 years, but just do it for 1 year. And the Houston situation is very cut and dry. You should be rebuilding. You should be losing games next year. You should be investing in weapons around your future quarterback you're going to draft so you can seamlessly bring him in to that position. The Detroit Lions have the number 2 overall pick. Do you use that number 2 overall pick on Kyle Hamilton? That's a big investment for a safety. It's a big investment for a safety. I think Houston, they're looking at a guy like Baker Mayfield right now. Maybe they want to take a chance on him. I think Baker has really good upside. If I was Indianapolis, I would be much more interested in Baker Mayfield than Matt Ryan, but I guess that's a whole other topic for another day. Really don't know what the Colts are doing. They're going from recycled quarterback to recycled quarterback to recycled quarterback. You're going from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz to, you had Jacoby Brissett, and now you have Matt Ryan. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of kind of washed up quarterbacks. I feel really bad for Colts fans. If I was a Colt fan, maybe the Browns are asking for a first-round pick. Maybe it's too much, but I would highly suggest I would much rather trade for Baker Mayfield and take chances on his upside than someone like Matt Ryan. I still think Matt Ryan could be a decent quarterback, but a message to Colts fans, Matt Ryan's not leading you anywhere. I'll just breaking news right now. Matt Ryan ain't leading you to the Super Bowl, but that's a whole nother topic. Seattle's in a very unique position. If I was a Seahawks fan, I would just want you to take a path. Just please take a path. Either try and contend and trade for Baker Mayfield. I would not recommend trading for Jimmy G. Although I don't think the 49ers would trade Jimmy G in division anyways. But do one of 2 things. Trade for Baker Mayfield. You've got Baker, you've got Tyler Lockett, and you've got DK Metcalf. Or option number 2, which is what I would do and what I did when I rebuilt the Seattle Seahawks using the mock draft. You can trade Tyler Lockett right now. He's already 29 years old. He doesn't fit in with your future timeline. You trade him right now for a second-round pick. You trade DK Metcalf for a first and a second-round pick probably. You take a look at what Devontae Adams got. He got a first and second-rounder. That's what you could get for DK Metcalf. Now you've got so many assets to work with. And you could really do a very similar thing the Houston Texans are currently doing, where you get all these assets, you build around your future franchise quarterback, and then you tank next year because you've got a bunch of rookies. You get the 2nd or 3rd overall pick, and you draft one of the franchise quarterbacks. We're looking ahead at 2023. We're seeing a much more elite draft class with a CJ Stroud, with a Bryce Young. We don't know exactly how they're going to develop their junior year, but they look like they're on a trajectory to be a significantly better prospect than any quarterback this year. And you want the transition to work better than the Jacksonville Jaguars did with Trevor Lawrence, than the Chicago Bears did with Justin Fields. You want the weapons in place, so if you're Seattle, getting a second-round pick for Tyler Lockett, you can parlay that into a younger receiver. The receiver class this year is so deep. You could get a first and second-round pick for DK Metcalf. You can draft an offensive tackle. You've already got the number 9th overall pick and the number, I think, 50th overall or maybe 40th overall pick from Denver in the Russell Wilson trade. And also, I think you've got next year's first round. Yes, you got 2 more first-round picks from Denver. So the Seattle Seahawks and the Houston Texans, you're in a position right now, you just have to be really bad for 1 year. Get your building blocks, get a really good offensive tackle, get a really good wide receiver, maybe 2 good young wide receivers, get a really good young tight end, invest in positions around your future quarterback. That is my strategy. The strategy is to tear down, rip the Band-Aid off, be really bad, make sure you secure that number 1, that number 2 overall pick, that elite pick, rather than doing this la-la land thing where you're 4-12, you're 5-11, you're floundering. You're not able to get Bryce Young if you have the 7th overall pick. You're not able to get CJ Stroud if you have the 9th overall pick. The strategy that I would implement, be really bad for 1 year with a bunch of rookies, and then draft your franchise quarterback. Get good receivers. This receiver class is so deep. The Seattle Seahawks, the Houston Texans, what great opportunities both those franchises have. And with Seattle, it's a little different because they could get Baker Mayfield and say, we're going to, this is an attractive option to us. We're actually going to try and win this year with Baker Mayfield and with Tyler Lockett and with DK Metcalf. They could say that. I personally wouldn't advise it. I would say do my strategy, but you know what? They're in a position to where they could do that. Houston, it's a little bit different. They don't have a legitimate quarterback option. There's no point for them to trade for Baker Mayfield. They could have done it. They made the trade with the Browns for Deshaun Watson. They didn't want Baker Mayfield. I think that signals they're ready to go in to 2022 with Davis Mills, meaning they're ready to tank, and I don't understand why you wouldn't trade Laramie Tunsil. He does you no good on this team unless maybe you want to keep him for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't, again, he's getting up there in age. I don't think he fits the timeline of your future team, of your future quarterback. Eat some of his contract right now. You've got a great low cap situation. You don't have to worry about the salary cap. Eat some of his contract, which would make him more viable to be traded, and you could get a higher draft pick back for him. And also, Brandon Cooks needs to be traded as well. I don't think Brandon Cooks wants to stay on Houston. They're not contending. It's obvious. And you'd be better off moving him. And then with Seattle, it's similar with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So really interesting situations. It's really just a 1-year tank, and then you build up and you get that franchise quarterback. And, the reason this would work was because there's Bryce Young, because there's CJ Stroud. These are quarterbacks we anticipate in the 2023 draft being the number 1, number 2 overall prospects. You've also got a wild card in Brennan Armstrong. Maybe someone else steps up. The 2023 quarterback class enables you to employ this strategy and be really bad for next year to make sure you get a number 1 or number 2 overall pick and really build around your quarterback this year before, instead of having to do what the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing, where they're panicked, they're not seeing any development from Trevor Lawrence because they've got no weapons around him, and now they're overpaying for Christian Kirk, and now they're overpaying for some of these other receivers they're getting. So that's what I would advise. That would be my strategy. It's option B. It's be really bad for 1 year. You lose your franchise quarterback, whatever. This is just a random example, but it's like you go 10-6, but you lose your franchise quarterback. Strip it down. Strip it down. 1-15. Now you're rebuilding. Now you're 4-12. Now you're working with your franchise quarterback. Now you're 9-7. You're getting good. Your young quarterback's growing, and you get to 12-4 instead of the other strategy where it's like, oh, we're still trying to contend. We're going to go 4-12, 5-11, 5-11, 3-13. That is purgatory. You do not want that. Fans do not realize it's better to go 0-16 than it is to go 3-13. Absolutely. People just it cannot compute in their heads. The number 1 pick is so much more valuable than the number 5 overall pick. It is better. It's a much higher asset. It can get you a franchise quarterback. It can get you a franchise pass rusher if you go 1-15, and you should also take advantage of this draft being so deep. This is such a deep draft. This is one of the best drafts I've seen in my life, with how deep it is. Now, it doesn't have the high end quarterback talent, but it's like you're getting first round value, mid-second, late second, early third. I do these mock drafts consistently. The strategy, especially this year, get as many draft picks as you can. Draft a George Pickens. Draft a Garrett Wilson. Get young receivers. Draft a Trevor Penning, an offensive tackle. Get yourself offensive options that will enable your young quarterback to succeed and grow, and you're not in a situation where you're stunting your young quarterback's development because you have nothing around him, like the Chicago Bears are doing with Justin Fields, like the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing with Trevor Lawrence. We see it time and time again. They draft the quarterback number 1 overall, then they just throw him out there, and the kid throws 18 interceptions, right? It's not a good strategy. Get the help and then draft the quarterback number 1 overall. That's what I would do, guys. That would be my rebuild strategy. I hope one of these teams really just does something different and they fully embrace a rebuild rather than being like, oh, we're going to, like, what's the point of keeping Brandon Cooks? What is the point? He's 29. By the time you're good again, he's going to be 32. What's the point? Well, I guess, again, we'll see what Seattle does. It's a little bit different with Seattle, where they may just go with Baker and say, we're going to try and contend this year. They might do that. But with Houston especially, it's like, guys, come on, just trade these guys, get more picks. If I was a Houston Texans fan, I would really want Laramie Tunsil traded and Brandon Cooks traded to clear up all your cap situation. You're going to be really bad next year, whatever. Get young players this year. You're going to have Davis Mills throwing them the ball, whoever, and then get your franchise quarterback next year. That's the idea. Use these elite quarterbacks that are going to be in the draft. Use it to your advantage. Prepare for them. Prepare for the fact that you're going to draft them. That is what a good franchise would do, guys. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.